So, first of all, there was about the Western Buddhist monastic gathering that 5 of us, right? 5, 6? With Venerable Sangha it was 5, otherwise 4 of us went to. It was held at Spirit Rock this last year. Did anybody do a BBC about it? Okay. So each year, we've done this for 24 years, and I've been able to attend for all of them except maybe 3 or 4, maybe. I'm not sure. But and we have them at different sites every time. So this one was at Spirit Rock in California, and there were about 45 people there. They were Westerners and Asians who taught in the West. And some of us knew other people, some of us didn't. The ordination age ranged from a few months to, I think Venerable Sangha was the eldest at like 44 years. And then in body age from, I don't know, early 20s, mid 20s to some of them looked like they were really getting up there, in their 70s, I would say. Yeah. And so quite a diverse group. We were from Theravada, then some Zen practitioners who keep celibacy, and then a number of people from the Tibetan tradition, from all the different Tibetan traditions. So we always get together from a Monday to a Friday every year. And it's not a conference. We don't have papers. We don't put out a report or anything like that. We just come together as friends and talk and share common interests and things like that. So it's really worthwhile, and it gives you, you meet other people who share your life purpose, who understand your life. You don't have to explain why you did what you did to them, because they're doing the same thing, so they understand. And it enables us to talk about, common interests and get to know each other's traditions and everything. And I think that this is a very hopeful element for Buddhism in the West, because traditionally in Asia, due to limited transportation, due to people not knowing other languages, the monastics from the different Buddhist traditions didn't met and didn't talk to each other. But here in the West, we all speak at least English, and so we can meet and discuss things. So it's really wonderful to learn firsthand from about the other traditions, because traditionally what you hear passed down is misconceptions. Yeah, and this actually came up in our first session together when we were discussing what an arhat was, and different, what are the obstacles to becoming an arhat and becoming a Buddha, and what's the difference between them. And you could see that different traditions have different assertions about these things. But if you're using one word from your tradition and you think it means the same thing in the other tradition, then you're going to think they're wrong. Now, why would we think that one word would have the same meaning in 2 different situations? Well, there's maybe the same situation, but different traditions. So it makes us become a bit more flexible. So we had some panel discussions and then breakout groups that followed those. And then we also had this thing called open space, in which people put up topics that they wanted to talk about, and then we grouped them together, and then broke out into groups where people could go with the group that wanted to talk about the subject they wanted to talk about. Planning this the first time was like a stand-up meeting that went on for an hour. where you're having like a group of people trying to make decisions on tiny details. Those of us from the Abbey were looking at each other like, we know all about this dynamic. It doesn't work very well. But after that, we got a little bit, we did it more quickly. But still, I think there could have been a faster way. It was quite interesting, some of the things that people said. I wanted to share with you in particular one thing that Venerable Kenri from Shasta Abbey said. So there were 4 of us who were ordained in the 70s. Sangye Kadro, me, Venerable Sekai, and Venerable Kenri. And so he was speaking one day at the panel you participated in. And so he said, and this is from all of his years of being a monk, you're always doing something. From morning to night, you're always doing something. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. Yeah? Just do it with a good motivation. That's the essence. And he said, you could be washing the dishes, you could be studying, you're always doing something. Don't be so picky about what you're doing, because what's really important is your motivation for doing it. And I really like that, because sometimes we are very picky about what we're doing. Yeah, I washed dishes yesterday, I don't want to wash them today. Yeah, you're telling me to do this job like this, and I don't want to do it like that. You're telling me, I'm on the list again for this, on the chore rota for this, and I already did it 15 times. Everybody else already did it 16 times, but I don't care. I did it 15, and I shouldn't have to do it again. Or whatever, you know how it is, okay? And I think, what he said, it just cut all of that. It cut it. It makes life so easy. You just do what you need to be doing when you need to be doing it. Don't make a fuss about it, and have a good motivation. And if you have a bodhicitta motivation, what you're doing is creating merit. And then you don't need to, stress about all this stuff of, is it fair, and how am I doing it, and I don't feel like doing it, and all that, Because I was thinking, how sometimes we get locked into something? Once in a while, not too often. But we get locked in, It's like, I'm putting my foot down, the spatula goes there, not there, This person is going to do that. I'm going to do this. This is not going to happen. And we get so tight. And what he said, it really made me think, like, is it that hard to be cooperative? Being cooperative just makes our lives so much easier. And yet sometimes we dig in our heels, we're uncooperative, we're miserable because we're angry. The other people we have to work with are miserable because they return the anger and they're mad at us. And it's like all we have to do is one simple thing, and we find it so difficult to cooperate because our mind just, we dig our heels in, and I am not doing that, period. Okay. Now, if somebody's asking you to go out and kill somebody, that's one thing, dig your heels in. But usually, the things we get so stubborn about are not that important. And it would be so much easier just to cooperate. So, when he was saying that, it really made me think, okay, because lots of times we have to do things we don't feel like doing, and we have to listen to people say what we don't feel like listening to. But if we do it with a good motivation, and especially if we do it with a motivation of kindness towards the other people, then everything goes much better, and the actual situation that bothered us gets resolved. Whereas, when we get really stubborn about it, the situation drags on, which means our misery drags on and on. Yeah. So that was just, one thing that really jumped out at me. People said all sorts of other stuff that was really quite wonderful. The topic of Me Too came up a lot, and people were pretty upset about that happening in the Buddhist world, especially in the Sangha, as well as with lay teachers. So there was a call to write a letter and send it to some of the leaders of the different traditions, asking them to discuss this with their followers. And so we'll see what comes of it. There were a few people who volunteered to write the letter. I don't know what's happened since, because it's only been a few days. We talked about the environment. We talked about all sorts of stuff. And very fruitful, very hopeful. Yeah. So we did one breakout group on identity politics. And, because now everybody has an identity, and the whole topic of identity is very prevalent, and it's being discussed a lot in society, especially among the young people. And then, of course, it mixes in with politics, because you have a racial identity, an ethnic identity, a religious identity, a gender identity, or whatever. And society, so many people in many groups say that society does not treat the people from their identity group equally. And so there was a lot of discussion about that. And to me, that's fine to, we got to speak out when things are not equal. But I've also had some experiences where people just get so attached to their identity that they have a hard time seeing beyond it. And people are going around, especially my white liberal friends, going around and telling many of us, you have white privilege. And it's like, yeah, I know I have white privilege, but they want to really kind of hammer it in. And I was thinking about it after we had that group. If, someone who was Black told me I had white privilege, no problem, and I would say, yeah, I do, and tell me what it's like for you, and I want to hear about your experience. But when my white liberal friends say, you have white privilege, and you don't know what it's like to be somebody who's African American when they step out on the street. And yeah, that's true, but that person who's telling me also doesn't know. Yeah, but I do know what it's like to be discriminated against. And I do know what it's like to be stared at and have rude remarks made towards me when I'm out in public. And I do know what it's like to live in a country, in a population where you're the minority, okay? Or to live in a different culture where you don't know the rules, because I've experienced that in my life. So anyway, there was that. And it was very interesting, because the whole discussion, when we get entrenched in our identities, is very clearly self-grasping, isn't it? Even if I, when I was getting a little bit irritated at my white liberal friends for telling me I had white privilege, I mean, that's still self-grasping on my side of, don't tell me about myself. Talk about yourself.
That article about psychedelics in Buddhism that you had been doing BBCs on, people there was a breakout group, and that article was the basis of that coming up. And they said that article was not very accurate, that the woman doing the ayahuasca retreats was bringing elements of Buddhism to it, but they were not billed as Buddhist retreats. That she does do Buddhist retreats at Spirit Rock, but not with drugs. And that the retreats, the ayahuasca retreats, were billed as ayahuasca retreats, and they were bringing Buddhist ideas to it.
And they did that elsewhere.
In Peru, yeah.
I see. Okay.
But there was also discussions about what the fifth precept says.
Right.
And I actually have a piece of paper I'd like you to look at. It's Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation from the Pali. And the terms, there's 3 different terms, and they all mean certain alcoholic drink.
Yeah. And so it's similar in the Tibetan. They always say chang, it's alcoholic drink. But the meaning is intoxicants. Chang is an example, okay? And of course, I don't know in India how many psychedelics they had at that time. They probably had some plants here and there, okay? But even though it says chang or alcohol, actually the Tibetans say chang, that is fermented barley power. Now, barley grain. If you take it literally, then don't drink any fermented barley grain. But you can have some whiskey, you can have some wine, you can have other things because they aren't that one. I think that's cutting corners, yeah. Because in the Tibetan tradition, we also include tobacco within the intoxicant one. They don't do that in the Theravada tradition, but we do.
There were two big areas that I thought were important to mention. One of the breakout groups I went to lasted for hours. I don't even know how many hours it was. And it was a discussion. Actually, it wasn't really a breakout group. It was more like a presentation, actually. And it went on for a long time. It was with one person who's been a preceptor for many ordinations, in conversation with a bhikkhu in Australia who does the Vinaya study for Ajahn Brahm's monastery, but it wasn't Ajahn Brahm. There's 2 Ajahn Brahms. It was a Brahm.
Brahm and then Brahmali.
Yeah. So anyway, that was interesting. The issue basically there was one person has a very sincere student who is, I don't know how she identifies herself, but I don't think the male or female categories actually work for her, and that's what they're exploring. So that was interesting. And the other thing that I actually found quite really heartwarming was just the whole staff of Spirit Rock. They were so happy to have us there.
Yeah.
And the people, I met a lot of the people that worked in the kitchen because I was looking at things, just wanting to thank them for their cooking and all their donated time. And they were just putting love into everything they were doing, the various staff people there. And they had a very beautiful ceremony where they brought in all the people. There were like probably 25 people.
Yeah.
31 people. I think they have 50 employees total.
64 employees.
64 employees to run this
imagine?
retreat center. And so, 31 of them came in and they each introduced themselves and said what they did. We had this kind of gratitude ceremony. And that was just the whole interaction with the staff and the location was really quite beautiful. And I thought that was a big part of the experience as well.
Yeah, I really noticed that too because had been to Spirit Rock in the past, and in previous years they very strongly identified with, we are a lay center, and their whole council of teachers, I think, is all lay teachers. But just in recent years, they've become more open to the Theravada monastics in the Bay Area. And then I think hosting our group, then they got exposed to all sorts of different monastics. And what you said is true. They were so happy to have us there.
Yeah, it meant a lot to them to be around so many monastics. It was palpable.
Yeah.
So that was quite beautiful.
Yeah.